Hey, First Things First listeners, before we start the show, I wanted to tell you about our brand new Fox Sports app and website, foxsports.com, reimagined for the modern sports fan. Go ahead, download the new app right now. You don't even have to pause this episode. Every day on the new app and website, you'll see the top stories in sports. Plus, a rich world of written content, videos, social media, and analytics to give you a 360-degree view of the most important stories of the day. Streaming live TV has never been so easy or elegant. Every Fox Sports game, including all pregame and postgame shows, as well as the televised version of this show, just a click away. For the extra invested fan, we also go deep with real-time wagering lines, trending prop bets, win probability, and key player projections. So download the new Fox Sports app or visit www.foxsports.com. Now let's start the show. Good morning, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe alongside Nick Wright, Brandon Marshall, Kevin Wilds, and smack in the middle of NFL season, and we have a plethora of NBA news. We do, but that's every day, Brandon. That's not news. That's every single day.
Wilds, you got to tighten the tie a little bit. But what isn't every single day? Wilds has to tighten his tie a little bit if he wants to go fully dapper. Sorry, Jenna. Sorry. Jenna's telling us what's on the show. We're doing Project Runway.
You guys want to go fashion? I'm totally ready to take that in. But why don't we table that for just a second? Because of this blockbuster trade. It was huge. It got our attention yesterday. Russell Westbrook to the Wizards for John Wall and a first-round pick. I think it surprised a lot of people, but should it have? The Westbrook-Harden duo didn't work. And so now Russ joins his third team in as many seasons. For John Wall, he hasn't played since December 26, 2018, almost 2 years ago. So a chance for a fresh start for him as Harden's running mate now. Let the reaction begin. Nick, who are the winners and losers of this trade?
All right, I'm going to have, I think, an unpopular and certainly out of the mainstream opinion on this. I actually like this trade for both teams. I think both teams were in a spot where they knew where we are right now, we're kind of stuck. The Wizards needed to hand the car keys to Bradley Beal, and they understood John Wall has literally not a day in his basketball life played a game where he wasn't the leader and best player on a team. So coming back from the Achilles 2 years removed, when Beal is just coming off a near all-NBA season where he averaged 30 points a game, it needed to be his team, his being Bradley Beal's. And that's tough when John Wall, who had always been the big brother figure in that relationship, comes back and says, hey, before I popped my Achilles and had my heel surgery, I was an all-NBA caliber player myself. So they needed to make this move. And for the Rockets, they had to shake the snow globe once again as they go through rotating list of guys who once upon a time were top 10 players in the league to see if they can fit alongside James Harden. Dwight Howard didn't fit, didn't like it that much. Chris Paul actually really did fit. They almost won a championship, but that relationship soured. Russell Westbrook, it took a year, and it's like, love each other, hang out, maybe barbecue together post-COVID, but we probably shouldn't be playing together. So now they take on John Wall. And I think the Rockets will be interesting. They added Christian Wood. We'll see what Wall looks like post-Achilles. And the Wizards, they already have the fastest player in the league in Ish Smith. They drafted Denny Avdia, who could have gone second in the draft, ended up going ninth. They bring back Bertans. We mentioned Beal's coming off his best season. And Russ, before the stoppage, was playing good basketball. So, Brandon, neither of these are championship teams. I do believe they are both now firmly playoff teams. And I like it for both sides.
There you go. You said it. They're no contender. This is comical, Nick. When this came out, I'm like, why? When I see superstar athletes getting shopped or traded and moves like this happen, the first thing I think about, how does it make the team better to win a championship? This is a lose-lose situation. It's a simple wash. Like, look at this. Now, Houston Rockets, they're stuck with John Wall. Let's say he balls, he doesn't ball. But you're stuck with him for 3 years, guaranteed. How does he make your team better? I just don't see it. I don't understand it. maybe Russ and Bill's a better fit than Bill and Wall, but how does this make you better? Now, I can get a player. Let's look at it from a player's perspective. I can understand a player going to a losing situation or a situation where you're not going to win, or you feel like you're not that last piece to make that team better and put them in contention. So when you look at this from a player's perspective, if a guy, he hasn't signed that big deal, Wilds, and he has his money, he doesn't have his money, then I can understand going to a losing situation. But if you have your money already, both of these guys signed huge contracts, why does this make sense for you? John Wall, how does this make sense for you? Russ, how does this make sense for you? So, Wilds, I don't understand. I think it's comical. It's a wash to me. It's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, well, I think Russ wanted to just get out of Houston. And trying to debate whether or not he's the perfect fit with Bradley Beal is like debating whether the door that you're clinging onto as the Titanic goes down is comfortable enough. Doesn't really matter. Just get out and stay afloat. Now he's on a playoff team. He's reunited with Scott Brooks, Nick. And I think more than anything, we know he can't shoot. We know he's not the most efficient guy in the world. But he brings a certain, as Broussard say, doggedness to the squad of like a winning culture and just like full speed ahead all the time that I think would make Bradley Beal a better player.
Well, and let me respond to something Brandon said, which is why would either one of these guys want it if they're not going to be able to compete for a championship? Listen, Russ is one of my favorite players ever, and I like John Wall a lot as what he's done in the community in D.C. I think he's been unfairly maligned at times, and a healthy John Wall, people forget his last full healthy season, they not only won 49 games, they won a round in the playoffs, and they win 7 against Boston in round 2, and Wall averaged like 27 and 11 in that series, if I remember correctly. He was a really good player pre-injury. We'll see what he is post-injury. I say all that to say this, though, Jenna. There is no championship team that is trading for Russ or Wall, not at their age, injury status, and contract. It is impossible for those guys right now to get to a contender because a contender is not trading for one of those guys. And so I think at this point for Russ and Wall, on their current deals, it's trying to make the best of what could be mediocre situations. For Wall, he'll get to change his scenery for the first time ever. And for Russ, he'll get to see if it works with Bradley Beal and Scott, reunited with Scott Brooks, as Wild mentioned, Jenna.
All right, can we talk about what this means, though, for James Harden for a second? Harden was rumored to be on the trade block all off season. A report yesterday, the Rockets do not envision trading him before the season. Now they're going to stick it out, try to make it work, try to win with him there, obviously now with John Wall. So, Nick, what does this trade mean for Harden's future?
The Rockets are not trading James Harden before the start of the season. Maybe they trade him at the deadline if it goes bad. But do you know the only all-star caliber player that's been in the playoffs, that's played in the playoffs every year the last 8? It's Harden. Since he went to the Rockets, he's been in the playoffs every single year. He's the only guy in the league that can say that. My guy LeBron can't even say that. Giannis can't say that. KD can't say that. It's just Harden. So they're going to be a playoff team, and they are going to try to make this work, Brandon. Now, if it gets real bad, if they're playing terribly, could he be moved at the deadline? Possibly. But you are going to, once you saw that Drew Holiday was worth a generation of first-round picks and players, then the price of the brick went up, so to speak, to quote the great Marlowe from The Wire. So listen, if you're going to want James Harden, you're going to have to pay a hell of a lot more than a team like the Nets is capable of paying, Brandon, and I don't believe it's happening any chance whatsoever it happens before the start of the season.
Okay, so Nick, let's say that James Harden, he's still on that team when the season kicks off in a couple of days, right? Couple of weeks. All right. I think they find themselves in an amazing situation in the organization, but it's still terrible for the player. Like, this could potentially work. Now, both of these guys are ball dominant. They dominate the basketball. But I feel like the chain of command is just different here. The Russ and Harden relationship, it's like, who gets the last word in the locker room? Who takes the last shot? If our team is down by 15 and it's time for the superstar player to take over, who does that? Who dominates the ball, right? But now you look at this situation, Kevin, you got Harden. Everybody knows this is Harden's team. People already knew it was Harden's team.
Exactly.
But this isn't. This is a superstar and this is an all-star. So I think this could potentially work.
That's exactly right.
But then, Kevin, Nick, our buddy Nick continues to neglect the player's perspective. James Harden wants out. This isn't John Wall. This isn't Russell Westbrook who's saying, I just want to find a little better situation. I don't think a playoff team or a contender, will trade for me.
Right.
Well, James Harden wants to win. He has his money. The same thing I just talked about. He has his money. He wants to win. He wants out. So he can force his way out, and I think it gets really ugly no matter if they're in a good situation, which I think they will be before the trade deadline, or not.
Look, it would have to get really ugly for him to leave, but he should want to leave. He's 31 years old, Nick. He's not getting any younger. That championship window is closing. I think he looks around the West like, hold on, do we get better? We got John Wall and Boogie Cousins. This was cool like 4 years ago, but not right now. And by the way, he's basically already on a new team. He's got a new owner, a new GM. Yep. He's got a new coach. He's got new teammates, and he's got new offensive scheme. So he's basically on a new team. But he's just got the same uniform on. So, like, I might as well actually go to a new team if I'm going to be on a new team.
Correct. But he also has 2 guaranteed years left on his deal before a player option. So if the new GM in Houston, Rafael Stone, if Harden says, hey, congrats on the John Wall trade, but to quote the great Magic Johnson, I ain't going to be here. If Rafael Stone says, all right, I got great news for you. We found a trade. A team's going to include a young star. A team's going to include a boatload of picks. I hope you enjoy looking at the real estate in Sacramento because we've worked it out. That's the only trade that meets our needs. You want to go there or you want to see how you and Wall work out? Because he does have the ability to force his way out. He does not have the ability to pick his destination. And while Houston might not be perfect, it is not the barren desert of a handful of places Houston could send James Harden to for a team that would say, I would love to have James Harden. We'd love to be the 7th seed and have a guy that scores 35 a night. Championships be damned. So I do think Houston has the leverage in that regard, Jen, and I think they will see if this pairing can possibly work.
I wish we had 10 more minutes on this topic.
Sacramento.
We got 2 more hours.
We have a number of more minutes on this topic. Funny you should say that. We got to take a turn, talk some Steelers now. Big win yesterday over the Ravens. Not a pretty one. Still a big one as they remain undefeated. Mike Tomlin knows how badly they played. Take a listen.
Mike, you had some red zone failures and a number of drop passes. What do you attribute that to? Anything in particular?
Sucking.
Hey, First Things First listeners, it's Charlotte Wilder here to tell you about my new podcast with Mark Titus called the People's Sports Podcast. It comes out every Thursday, and Mark and I take one of the big stories of the week, and then we go off on tangents you never saw coming. This might mean that we start talking about the Dodgers winning the World Series and end up wondering if Knicks fans deserve happiness. Or begin with LeBron's greatness and end up drafting our ultimate beer league softball team made up of old athletes. Whatever it is, the only rule of the show is that it has to be fun and funny, because these days we could all use as many laughs as we can get. So check it out wherever you get your podcasts and come down weird sports rabbit holes with us. We can't wait to have you. Now, back to First Things First.
Back here, First Things First, and we have some breaking news to pass along. Anthony Davis and the Lakers are finalizing a 5-year, $190 million extension. This on the heels of the other big news this morning that LeBron signed a 2-year extension yesterday. So LeBron and AD now tied together with the Los Angeles Lakers for the next 3 seasons. All right, Nick, let me just start with you. What was your reaction to these moves?
Well, listen, as far as the AD news, which just broke, I think it's going to have surprised a lot of people, but it shouldn't have. I think a lot of the NBA thought Anthony Davis was going to sign a 2+1, meaning a contract that would take him through years 9 and 10. Then he'd be a free agent after year 10, be able to get, the increase in salary you can get being a 10-year player in this league. I said on this show a few weeks ago, I reported a few weeks ago that I was told by someone someone who 1,000% would know he's either going as short as possible or as long as possible, meaning Anthony Davis was considering 2 contracts, a 1+1 or this contract he just signed, a 5-year deal, which is really a 4+1, tie him to the Lakers as long as he possibly can be tied to them. And this is right after LeBron James tied himself to the Lakers as long as he, according to the CBA, is allowed to be tied to them. Given his age, it gets complex on that. But LeBron's extension he signed is the longest he's allowed to sign. These 2 guys understand they are the favorites to win the title this coming season. And there is no reason they will not be the favorites or one of the very, very short list of co-favorites or near favorites over the next few years. So why go anywhere? You're in arguably the most livable city in America if you're rich. You are in a place that is the most attractive destination, not only for free agents, but also for veteran minimum guys chasing a ring. And you've got the best player in the league and the best big in the league, who seem to really like each other. So this was something of a no-brainer. It would have been surprising if Anthony Davis didn't do this. LeBron had never signed an extension at any point in his career except for his rookie extension. He kind of got the ball rolling, and AD then followed suit. And this is great news for Laker fans and a pretty big bummer for most of the rest of the league, Brandon.
Yeah. So we're supposed to be talking about LeBron James signing his extension. That's our topic around basketball today. That's what it was supposed to be. So when I saw that, LeBron extension 2 for 85, the first thing I thought about was, and it wasn't shocking. To me, it wasn't breaking news. We knew that. A lot of the talk about LeBron James going to Los Angeles because this is the end of his career and he's ready to start transitioning into life after basketball. So the movies and his son's in high school and he loves LA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when I saw that, the very first thing I thought about was, where's AD? Why is this taking so long? And when you look at Windhurst and what he's been reporting and diving deep behind it, it's this kid was really looking at spreadsheets and really studying the salary cap to figure out, how does this deal set me up for the rest of my life? Not just from a financial standpoint, but with the salary cap, how is this going to play out the next couple years? And what is the deal after that? And after that going to look like for me? So I think we're, like you said, Nick, we're not shocked by this. We knew it was going to get done. But for me, I was getting anxious. Like, why is it taking so long, Wilds? Like, we know that everything Nick said is so true. You are the favorites. You're coming off of a championship. You have the greatest player in this sport, maybe ever. So why aren't you getting the deal done? So I'm glad that it happened. And it seems like he positioned himself very well after studying all them spreadsheets and figuring out how this is going to set him up for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, well, look, the Lakers are going to be relevant for a long time. They always have been. They always will be. The Lakers have been to the finals for 32 years of the NBA's existence. Basically, they win the final. It means they go to the finals every other year. They win it about once every 3 years. So, once every 4 years. Do the math. So, Nick, look long term. Something special about a big man in a Lakers uniform. What do you think AD's ceiling is? From the 4 Laker greats, Shaq, Wilt, Kareem, and now AD. How high can he go? Can he overtake those guys? I don't think you think he's better than any of those guys right now. But what would he have to do to say, let's get over? I don't even know how you want to rank those guys. But he's on that little Mount Rushmore.
It's easy to rank them.
Big men already.
It's easy to rank them. So Kareem, Wilt, Shaq, and then a big gap, and then Anthony Davis.
Okay.
It's funny you asked me that. I'm working on something that I've been working on for, the last 70 hours over the last few months, which is the 50 best players of the last 50 years. And you know who found himself on that list? Anthony Davis. Came in, I think, 37th. Wow. And you might say he hadn't done enough yet, but he really has. He's already made 4 first-team All-NBAs. He was the second best player on a champion. Like he's had monster playoff moments. He's never had a bad playoff series. And so, unfortunately, when you're talking about passing those other guys, Wilt obviously wasn't over the last 50 years. Kareem is 3rd. Shaquille O'Neal is 9th. Yeah, 9th. So, I mean, it's a high mountain to climb to get up there. But I would say Anthony Davis, without... listen, Shaq's got 4 rings. He's got a league MVP. He had one of the most dominant stretches ever. Go ahead.
So I don't think if they go back to back, if they win this one and they find themselves potentially doing a three-peat or just in that discussion, like, okay, maybe they make it back and they lose, he could potentially be alongside of Shaq and Wilt. And like, why not? Because it comes down to championship. His game is so smooth. It's not, the old traditional big man game, Wilds. But this dude, like you said, Nick, he is a top 50 player of all time. So now if you add a few championships to that, I think he's alongside of those guys, 100%. And he's one of the faces of the Lakers organization forever.
So 2 things, one related to this, one totally unrelated. The related thing is people, because Anthony Davis has been in the league for so long, people think he's older than he is. When this contract is over, he'll be 31. So the idea, he just signed a 5-year extension that he can opt out of after 4 years. If he were to do that, he'll be 31 re-entering free agency. So he's got, maybe 10 playoff runs left in him. So the ceiling, it's almost impossible to place on it. But I want to take this car and turn it in a totally different direction. Because I said intentionally, this is bad news for nearly every other fan base. Let me tell you what fan base this morning this is amazing news for. The Milwaukee Bucks. Because what the Los Angeles Lakers have told the entire league is, we think Giannis is staying. Because Giannis, the possibility of Giannis coming to LA, his brother's there. He just gave a long interview to a journalist, basically laying all the flowers at LeBron's doorstep. And there was a possibility, if LeBron didn't sign the extension, if Anthony Davis just signed a 1+1 and then opted out and then LeBron opts out, that they could have in theory brought Giannis over as a free agent if everyone's willing to take a little bit less to then create what would be the most dominant super team in modern NBA history, in ever NBA history. These 2 contract extensions end that permanently. So I don't know if the Lakers know that Giannis is signing his supermax, which I think he is, and I've been told the league believes he is, but they know they're not in the sweepstakes. That if he's not signing the supermax, if he is going to be available, it's Dallas, Miami, Toronto. It's not going to be the Lakers, Wilds, because these 2 deals slam the door shut permanently on Giannis ever becoming a Laker.
Yeah, I never thought that was a real thing. And I thought the Photoshops looked nice. Maybe the Heat, the Giannis to the Heat rumors feel like they have a little more of a pulse, but I never bought the Giannis to the Lakers rumors at all. Now, the other question is this. When are we going to see Anthony Davis on the floor without LeBron? You think LeBron retires a Laker, or are we going to see Anthony Davis and LeBron play against each other ever, Nick? Go into your crystal ball. Does Anthony Davis and LeBron ever play against each other ever again?
There's only one scenario.
So the scenario. I'll go in my crystal ball later.
What a tease! What a tease!
We'll go into it later.
All right. It was a tease to me as well. Once again, Anthony Davis signs a 5-year, $190 million deal with the Lakers. Much more on this still to come, both his deal and LeBron, both of their extensions, his and LeBron's. Chris Broussard will join us next to break it all down, and then we can dive into that crystal ball next. First things first. Back here with Chris Broussard. We are talking about the breaking news this morning out of the NBA. Anthony Davis close to finalizing a 5-year, $190 million extension with the Los Angeles Lakers. Davis's deal coming not even 24 hours after LeBron and the Lakers agreed to a 2-year, $85 million extension. Probably just a coincidence. So both Lakers stars now aligned for the next 3 seasons in L.A. Broussard, I'll start with you. Chris Broussard joining us, by the way. We're so comfortable. I just call you by your last name. Assume you're always here. Broussard, what was your reaction to AD and LeBron James extensions?
Look, it's great for the Lakers. My reaction was kind of ho-hum. Like, I expected this. Now, the timing of LeBron's extension, let's go there first. That was a bit surprising. You weren't really looking at LeBron to sign an extension at this moment. But the notion that he's going to end his career with the Lakers, I think everybody has believed that. And this may not even be his last contract. but I'm not surprised he's going to be long-term with the Lakers whatsoever. As far as Anthony Davis, no one thought he was leaving the Lakers. It was just a matter of what contract he was going to sign. And if you know the history of Clutch management, then they take their time and they look at every single option. Is it advantageous to do a 1-year deal or a 3-year deal, 5-year deal, whatever the case? Obviously, they went long-term in this case, but it's not surprising that he's staying with them. What this does, and I never gave any credence to the notion that Giannis Antetokounmpo was joining the Lakers. But what this does is pretty much in that. There's really no realistic shot of Giannis going to the Lakers now as a free agent to join LeBron and AD. I didn't think that would happen, but that was a rumor that was floated out there. This pretty much puts that to bed, but it's not surprising at all that these two are signing on long-term to be with the Lakers.
Well, let me say this. It didn't surprise me, and that was because, as Broussard did as well, I talked to some people directly involved in this and said everyone knew he was re-signing, but a lot of people thought he was going to take a 2+1, and I was told he's either taking a 1+1 or a 4+1, no in between, either the shortest or the longest. They went with the longest. But I would like to, we are looking at it through the prism of they just won a title. LeBron and Anthony Davis fit together and mesh together perfectly and immediately, and they are the overwhelming favorite going into this year. I'd like to take us back, I know we have no memory anymore, to, 15 months ago, when Paul George doesn't want to play with LeBron, Kawhi Leonard doesn't want to play with LeBron, LeBron's coming off an injury, and there is speculation about whether or not that team makes sense. You got our old buddy Chris Mannix, who knows his hoops, saying if you had to choose one or the other, Lakers win the title or miss the playoffs, put your money on miss the playoffs because that team can't win the title. And how much do people really like playing with LeBron? Does he minimize other stars? Is he too passive aggressive? Is he too much of a blame others? And so that all those narratives existed. And I say all that to say this. If this Lakers season, with LeBron James as the leader, had gone anywhere close to the way, just to pick a team out of thin air, the Clippers season did with Kawhi Leonard as the leader, you think Anthony Davis signing up for 5 more years of that? You think that it was just a fait accompli, no matter how the year went, AD was going to want to be next to LeBron for the bulk of the next half decade? Or was it because it worked so well? Was it because there was such that familial team environment pre-restart, during the stoppage, and post-restart in the bubble? Was it because not only the best player in the league, but the best leader in the league did everything necessary to make it clear, while I might have the car keys right now, AD, one day I will hand them to you, and I might even hand them to you in Game 1 of the NBA Finals. I might even hand them to you in Game 2 of the NBA Finals. I trust you that much. So it was not always going to be, of course this works, of course they win the title, of course Anthony Davis signs for the maximum extension. Part of that was the work that LeBron and those other players did in building up the team last year, Brandon, to making this feel like an obvious move to the rest of us upon hindsight.
Yeah, and after listening to you talk, the first thing that comes to my mind is, why does it take so long? Why did this take so long? We knew, there was doubt, but at the end of the day, after winning that championship together, you knew that he was going to be there. So the LeBron James news, that was no news to me. The very first thing I thought about was, wow, when is AD going to sign? When is that going to happen? So I'm glad to hear you, Chris, pull back the curtains a little bit on Clutch Agency, because they share the same agent. And why it took so long, because of their thought process. They really look at everything. He's looking at the salary cap for the next couple years and how this could potentially set up the next deal and the deal after that, or maybe even the deal after that. You talked about it, Nick. When this contract is over, this extension, he's going to be 31. So I'm glad that they got it done, and I'm finally glad to hear why it took so long because that's the first thing that came to our mind. You're in LA. You're playing with the greatest player in the league right now, Wilds. So why aren't we getting this done? So the Lakers, man, this is awesome for them. And I also think this sets up LeBron for that transition to the older statesman in that locker room, going from superstar to now the face of the organization and letting AD step out there and lead the way. So in the next couple years, you know, him being this big old point guard, he can now rely on those young guys and potentially get a championship or two out of it. So this is great news for the Lakers.
Yeah. You know what I think is interesting, Broussard? The Clippers play in LA too. But would we be shocked if in 2 years, 3 years, Paul George is not there and Kawhi is not there either? Like, it's got the same weather, but there's a franchise and deep roots of the Lakers organization that makes them more special than the Clippers. It's just the way it is. And I know the Clippers are your team. Don't get too mad at me. But
They're
Nick
not
also
my
mentioned
team.
something else
They
in the
are
last
not
block.
my team. My goodness.
You're a lifelong Clippers fan.
Let me end that narrative right now.
when they had like the sailboat logo. In any event, Nick, you mentioned something interesting, but I'll get Broussard's take on it. That they're a nice destination. Ring chasing is sort of the pessimistic version, but looking for to start my final chapter. Like, and you know what? Then I'll go to the Lakers. And we've seen it not work with Karl Malone and Steve Nash, but it felt like it worked with not his final chapter, but like, I'm going to go to the Lakers. This is a box I want to check on my NBA career. And I think that's the secret sauce that kind of pushes them over the top.
Well, look, the Lakers are the best franchise in the NBA. And I know Boston, you know, they've got the championships and all that, but the Boston hasn't been a dominant franchise since Bill Russell left. Now, they obviously had the Bird era, and then they won one championship with the last big three. But they haven't been great. They've been a pretty good franchise since then. The Lakers, every decade, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, they've been great every decade. And so the Lakers are what the Lakers. I mean, and even what Nick was saying with LeBron, and you're right, LeBron did a great job of creating an environment that AD wanted to stay in. I think I've always said this is the reverse of Magic Kareem. Right? Kareem was the superstar MVP when Magic got there, and then Kareem was able to age gracefully, and it became Magic's team, and he helped carry Kareem to a longer career than we ever expected. And I think the same thing can happen here. LeBron will probably be the best player on the Lakers this season, and then this will probably be the last year of that. Then AD becomes the best player 2 years from now. And this gives AD more time to observe LeBron, to learn from LeBron. How do you lead a team? How do you become more of an alpha, which AD is not naturally? And I think by the time he's the best player on the team, he will be ready because he will have learned from LeBron. And LeBron will still be like a top 10 player in the league, so they'll be in position to win more championships. So this is perfect for the Lakers. Just to answer your question quickly about the Clippers, Wilds, I wouldn't be surprised if Paul George is gone, but I think there's a good chance Kawhi is with the Clippers long term. We know he's from Southern California. They're a very good team. And I'm going to say this, because I'm not a Clippers fan. I got to make that clear. I grew up more of a Lakers fan. The Lakers should be the clear favorite going into this season. They are. They're my favorite going into this season. But do not sleep on the Clippers.
Yes.
Don't think the Clippers don't have a shot.
Thank you.
We're back. You're back.
Yes.
Don't think the Clippers don't have a shot. I'm just
they got no
letting you
shot.
know.
They got no
don't
shot.
think they don't have a shot.
All the issues they had last year, they have again. They have no shot. But today is not a day we talk about a barely relevant team. Today is a day. Oh, it fixes everything. Of course, he's actually going to help Kawhi Leonard move, so he's not a 3-hour drive from the airport. It's nice. It's definitely happening. But let's talk about a more important team. First of all, I'm very glad. I want to support Chris Broussard in one thing. I'm very glad Broussard's setting the record straight on the myth of the Celtics. You won 11 championships with Bill Russell. You have 6 since then. You have 1 championship since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Zip it, Celtic fans. You're not in this discussion. Now, as far as what we're discussing with the Lakers, here are the other things that I think are absolutely now not just like mind thought exercises, but legitimate points of discussion. If I had to ask you right now, you have to pick one of the following. LeBron James, in the rest of his career, only gets one more ring, or he gets 3 more rings. What's more likely? If we set the over-under at 2, so 2 is a push. Wilds, you would say 1. Okay, Broussard, if I said 0 more rings or 2 more rings, what are you picking?
2.
He never wins another one,
2.
or he ties my. Okay, there you go. All right, so you think your guess would be 5, but if you had to go 6 or 4, you'd land on 6. Here's the other thing we now know with LeBron's extension. LeBron guaranteed something that I don't know if people care about, but I know he does. He now passes Kareem in scoring in a Lakers uniform. He passes Magic in assists in a Lakers uniform. He's going to need about 2.5 years to pass Kareem, about 1.5 years to pass Magic, and a little more than that to move into 3rd all-time in assists. He does all of that in a Lakers uniform. That's what his extension means, and he does it while they're working on a 3-peat. That's what Anthony Davis's extension means, so it's all good.
And guess what, Nick?
Oh, he'll get a statue.
Yeah, and guess what, Nick?
Outside of Staples?
And the GOAT debate will still live on.
Oh, it's going to be so silly. When LeBron wins, when LeBron gets, it's going to be so silly.
One game on the NFL schedule yesterday. Steelers hosting the Ravens. RG3 in for Lamar Jackson. He had a rough go, threw a pick 6 right off the bat, left the game with a hamstring injury. Receivers on both teams dropping balls left and right. It wasn't pretty for either team, but the Steelers walk away with the win. They remain undefeated 11-0. Here is Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin after a very, very ugly win.
Couldn't run the ball effectively when we needed to. We dropped too many significant passes, very catchable, makeable passes. We didn't make significant plays in the special teams game. Our kickoff coverage unit wasn't good enough. We turned the damn ball over. We gave up big plays in critical moments on defense. Can't have it. They converted a long run on a possession down before the half. Unacceptable. They had a 70-yard touchdown late in the game. Unacceptable. And so we're fortunate tonight. It's good to proceed with the victory. I acknowledge that, but not a lot happened tonight to be proud of or to be excited about other than that.
I love it. I love it.
Other than that, how was the play?
Coach, that's real.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that was real. He's really angry. He's 11-0. A lot of time you coaches, Coach Mangini, you guys say things just to get us riled up in the locker room, but Coach Tomlin was really upset.
Himself riled up. He got himself riled up. And he had reason to be. That Steelers team struggled to beat a very depleted Ravens team yesterday. So, Coach, good morning. Eric Mangini with us right now. Coach, let's start with, are you surprised that it was so hard for Pittsburgh to walk away with a W in this one?
Well, no, I'm not surprised by Mike's reaction. I'm not surprised by some of the difficulty that they faced with the Ravens. You get in this situation where you're as successful as they've been, and you're playing a team that's depleted. And you saw the Stephen Tuitt tweet talking about how it should be an easy win. You're constantly having to overcome this sense of complacency, and human nature comes into it. And I talk about it all the time, is learning how to win and dealing with that environment. And so I never felt that the game was out of the Steelers' control yesterday. I never felt like they weren't going to win the game. And even though he said it looked like a JV game, the good news is that their JV is better than Baltimore's JV. I actually thought the last time they played was a worse performance when they gave up 47 carries for 265 yards. There's like 5.6 yards a carry, and they were either the first or second rush defense in the league. They had 35 minutes time of possession. They got dominated the last game and found a way to win. But the frustration here for Mike is that when you play a team that you're supposed to beat and you play down to that level, eventually it's gonna catch up with you. And he's trying to keep his finger on the throttle. And I'll just say that Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick were two of the best at, when you were winning, keeping their finger on the team to make sure that there was always that sense of urgency.
All right, so, Coach, I know I was joking a little bit entering this conversation about Coach Tomlin because they're sitting here at 11-0, and he's really angry, and you get the win, and we know how hard it is to win in the National Football League week in and week out. But the reality for me is it's not about the game, right? Like, and it's hard. This is a tough conversation because as a player, former player, you have to understand that you can't make decisions in a vacuum. You can't have certain conversations in a vacuum because we're trying to set up the league and the people that's going to follow us for years to come. Like, I got to think about what is the wide receiver position and the way deals are structured for the guys that's coming 5 years behind me. Jerry Rice, Terrell Owens, Marvin Harrison, those guys paved the way. Ray Lewis's of the world, Peyton Manning's of the world. So I say all that to say this. You know, for me, it wasn't about the game. So when we talk about the why behind this game looking sluggish and the why behind the Pittsburgh Steelers playing the way they did and the Baltimore Ravens, we can't have this conversation without talking about this week. COVID-19 struck these locker rooms, struck this locker room hard. So I get it. And after the game, you started hearing more talk and more rumblings about, we didn't have much practice time. I pulled my hamstring because I wasn't conditioned. So what do you expect? So I guess for me, and I say we can't have these conversations in a vacuum because look, we want football. Football is awesome. It's a distraction throughout. It's been a distraction throughout, half of 2020. We all need it. We love football. And the NFL, the players, the coaches have done a phenomenal job, okay, in making sure guys are safe as they can be while putting a good product out there. But at the end of the day, it's getting to that part of the season now, as cases are increasing, now it's more challenging. So I guess, Nick, Coach, my question is, how do you continue to keep the team together when there's so much change? Like this, it's already tough throughout a week. We're away from our families all 7 days a week pretty much. So that's 9 to 5. That's sometimes 6 to 5. So now with all these changes, how do you keep things together when you're talking about, we're not practicing today, we are practicing today, we're doing Zoom, or we're going to meet over here, we're going to meet over there. I just think we can't have these conversations in a vacuum right now because it's so tough to keep everything together, Coach and Nick.
Yeah, it is really tough, Brandon, and everybody is going through this and trying to navigate through a landscape that there's no map for. And I really believe that Mike Tomlin's frustration comes from the fact that once you do get to the playing field and you've overcome all the challenges during the course of the week, there's an expectation that you're going to perform at a certain level. And his team is obviously very good, and he's obviously has very high standards for what he expects from his team. So overcoming those challenges, getting to the point where you can actually show up and play, and then playing really poorly, they're 11-0 because he doesn't want to hear excuses. And he has high expectations, and that's, I think, where his disappointment comes from. It is hard. Everybody right now in the league and everybody right now in the country and the world is trying to figure out the best way to go through this and to deal with it. And we're all facing those challenges.
And I think Tomlin understood that while we're all facing those challenges of those two teams, it was the Ravens, not his team, who had been decimated this week by COVID. And yet these two teams, when you watched them, they looked about even. And I think Tomlin's frustration comes from this place. He knows this team is not as good as an 11-0 record suggests. They've beat 2 playoff teams this year. They've had 1 impressive victory over a good team. That was a Browns team that I think is a good team, but nobody else seems to. Their other victory over a playoff team was a Titans team that missed a 45-yard field goal in the final minute to tie that game. And he knows 4 of their next 5 games are against playoff teams. And I also think he knows this. This very well might be the first-round matchup in the playoffs. The Steelers are not going undefeated, Kevin Wildes. They're going to lose at least once in the final 5 weeks, if not twice. And if they are the 2 seed, Baltimore has a very soft schedule the rest of the way. If they steady themselves and get to the 7 spot, I think Baltimore goes into that potential third, not even rematch, but their third time against them, saying, game 1, Lamar had 4 turnovers, threw a pick 6, threw another pick that was almost returned for a touchdown. It then got punched in, and we lost by 4. Game 2, we were on our second and then third string quarterback. Game started with a fumble. Then there was a pick 6. We still were a 3rd and 6 stop away from getting the ball back down 5 with 2 minutes left. I think Baltimore thinks, give us a third shot. Fully healthy with Lamar, we can beat these guys. And I think Tomlin understands, having watched these 2 teams play twice, Baltimore has played very poorly in the first matchup. They had basically a second string team in the second matchup, and both of the games came down to the final couple minutes. And I think that rightfully Wilds concerns Mike Tomlin, because I think he knows the 2 seed for them is very possible as well.
I like this. You're taking a page out of my book. It's like what I do to the Chiefs. Like the wins don't count anymore. Yeah, they're 11-0, but this and but that, and but they played Jacksonville. It's also what we do to Baker, and you rip us for that. But I like that you're coming away to our sort of way of thinking. When you look at the schedule, Mangini, I call you Coach. Coach, I am a little bit nervous about this Washington game. They've been just chilling out since Thanksgiving, getting ready, got the #1 pass defense. They've got Chase Young going to make Ben Roethlisberger's night really bad. And then at the same time, Steelers are kind of like, I don't know. This was a bumpy road for them. So the question is this, real quick, because I know we have to go to break. Certain times in like a no-hitter, it's like, oh, you got a no-hitter going. And the pressure starts to like ratchet up. Like, oh, don't talk to the pitch. It's starting to ratchet up. Do you feel like the Steelers, the pressure of the undefeated season, ratcheting up, when does it become a burden?
Well, first of all, to Nick's point, there's no way that Mike Tomlin's sitting there thinking about the 2 seed with 5 weeks out. He's worried about getting the team ready to play for the next week and over the course of the next 5 games. And when you start thinking 5 and 6 weeks ahead, that's where you get in trouble, and that's where the players get in trouble, is when you look past opponents. In terms of it ratcheting up, I think it definitely ratchets up. It's definitely a function of everybody telling you how great you are, understanding that you have a chance to make history, and then putting too much pressure on yourself instead of just going out and dealing with the next situation you're in. It's going to be hard for them to overcome that pressure as it keeps mounting.
They lose to the Cleveland Browns and the Colts.
Again,
Brandon's
Steelers
with me.
walk away
2
with
losses.
the win. They'll take it. We got to jump back to the NBA now. LeBron likes LA, will stay in LA, and AD will do the same thing. We're talking about the breaking news out of Lakerland. LeBron and Anthony Davis will be there for a hot minute. That's next. First things first. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
In 2 days, it's the fight event of the fall as undefeated Errol Spence Jr. takes on Danny Garcia for the World Welterweight Championship. Available on pay-per-view, or you can buy the fight on foxsports.com/PPV and watch anywhere you want. All right, let's get back to last night's big NBA news. Russell Westbrook to Washington for John Wall and a first-round pick. For Russ, this will be his 3rd team in as many seasons after 11 years in OKC, and then last year alongside Harden in Houston. But for Wall, who hasn't played basketball in almost 2 years, this is a chance for a fresh start as Harden's running mate. Chris Broussard still with us. Busy morning here on First Things First. Broussard, who are the winners and losers of this trade?
Well, look, this was indeed a blockbuster trade because of the names involved. John Wall was a perennial all-star. Russell Westbrook is a legend. Yes, a legend, the first ballot Hall of Famer and a legend for the 3 triple-double seasons. But neither of these teams is going to be very good. So I don't know that there's a huge winner, but if I have to pick which team won the trade, I'm going with Washington because Washington becomes relevant. Right? We want to see Russ and Bradley Beal play together, just like we wanted to see Russ and James Harden play together, if for no other reason than to see can it work. And I actually think it can work to a degree where I give them a shot, a pretty good shot, at making the playoffs in the East. Now, it's not guaranteed, but I think they'll battle with Atlanta, maybe in Indiana, you know, kind of for that 7-8 area in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. So they're relevant. They got a shot. You put the ball in Russ's hands. You surround him with shooting. They were a good three-point shooting team last year, 8th in the league, I believe. And so you go from there. You're relevant. You're sexy. You're fun to watch. People are talking about you. As far as Westbrook overall, though, I think he would have been better off just staying in Houston. So I don't know that he's a winner overall. Obviously, he had talked too much, and it just had to be done at this point. But he was in a better situation with the Rockets. He may never play another relevant playoff game in his career. In Houston, they could have been maybe a second-round playoff team and gotten into the playoffs and made a little noise. But now he still can make all-star teams, though, in the East. That's something John Wall probably will never make an all-star team in the West. There's just way too many guards there, especially if James Harden stays with him. So I think overall, Wall was a loser in this deal, and the Wizards were the winners.
Let me ask you a question, Broussard. Because you said if Russ stayed in Houston, they could, play relevant playoff games potentially, like they did last year. Maybe the second round last year,
right,
they got beat by the best team. Why can't that happen with Houston with Wall? Like, I know we haven't seen Wall play in 2 years, but I think Christian Wood is a really good signing by them. I think Steven Silas is going to do a good job. Harden is still an unquestioned top 6 player in this league. If John Wall is even 80% of what he was pre-Achilles injury and heel injury, why can't they go a similar place they would have gone with Russ?
One, Wall's not as good as Russ. And I know they're similar style players, but it's a big if he's going to be what he was when he got injured. Okay, remember, he's got the knee injury and then the Achilles on top of that. But beyond that, what Russell Westbrook gave you, even though he and Harden weren't a great fit, and obviously Russ isn't great off the ball, he had this aggressive ferocity that kept the opponent off balance, that kept the opponent off guard. It was like his ferociousness was an X factor that just could throw everything out of whack for the opponent. And so you had Harden, who was this tremendous half-court scorer and shooter, and then you had Russ, who was just a whirlwind. And as athletic as John Wall was, and maybe still will be, he is not that. He does not put the defense off balance the way that Russell Westbrook did. So that kind of X factor, that unknown that, threw teams off in the West, they won't have that anymore. I don't know how in the world these two, Harden and Wall, are going to play together. Wall's not a very good shooter. Wall dominates the ball as much as Harden or Westbrook did. Look, I just don't see this being very successful and very good for the Rockets. I'm sorry. I don't think the Rockets made a good deal at all. Because you got a first-round draft pick. Okay, wow. It's not going to be a high lottery pick. We know it's protected. And so I think they would have been better off with Westbrook.
Okay, wow, that's my new thing. Broussard, I want to push back on your idea that Russ will never play a relevant playoff game. What do you think the strategy was, or the blueprint was, for the Heat to get to the finals? A super competitive guy, Russ, Jimmy Butler, surrounded with shooters and some good coaching. And a Giannis kind of breakdown, of course. But next thing you know, all of a sudden, wow, Heat are in the finals. So is there a chance? I don't think we're at Bradley Beal's, apex performance. I could see Russ pushing in, and I could also see Russ giving them that little bit of extra attitude that they need to sort of make a run. And I'm a fan of long shots. It's like we're Blazer buddies and like that. So I'm like, I'm trying to talk myself into the Wizards. So I'm just not ready to give up the fact that Russ can't get in the playoffs and make some noise.
You're leaving out a huge factor for Miami, that organization. That organization was a big part of their success this year. The professionalism, the drive of Pat Riley. Eric Spoelstra is a much better coach than Scotty Brooks. And Jimmy Butler is a better leader than Russell Westbrook is. And so those are huge factors. Now, I think they can make the playoffs, but it's not guaranteed. But look, the East is much better. Brooklyn wasn't there last year with Durant and Kyrie Irving. Philadelphia will be better with Doc Rivers and what they've done to surround their two young stars. Daryl Morey being there as well as the GM.
Boston will be worse.
I know Nick likes to hate on Boston. Boston's going to be good. I'm not saying they win the East, but they are going to be a good team. Stop sleeping on Jason Tatum. And your tears mean nothing to me. All right, Jason Tatum and the Celtics will be a tough team.
They're crocodile
And so
tears.
the East is much better. And don't
Jenna,
forget Milwaukee.
Does this conversation hurt your ears just a little bit? You and I, as the resident ultimate competitors, we love the risk. We love the adrenaline rush. So, they're sitting here talking about this, and we're not talking about championships. Whenever I see, all-stars and superstars get traded, the first thing I think about, does it make their team better and put them in position to contend? And the answer is no. So why is this conversation so big? This is a lose-lose situation. So I know we got to go to break. I know we got to push the conversation forward. I don't want to just put white noise out there. But the reality is, it's like, can they win a championship? Yes or no? You already have your money. Like, I can understand a player going to a losing situation if the money's better. But these guys both have their money, and they're sitting here in lose-lose situations. So I don't get it.
All right, well, the conversation continues. We got to take a turn now, head back to L.A. The other big story this morning, AD and LeBron are now locked in with the Lakers. They've got their money, and they're probably going to win a championship. Brandon, are they on their way to becoming the best duo in NBA history? We'll tell you next.
What are we talking about? Best duo in NBA history?
Back here, first things first, with stories to start your morning, sponsored by Ram Trucks, built to serve. And our big story, this is the big breaking news out of the NBA. Lakers and Anthony Davis close to finalizing a 5-year, $190 million extension. This on the heels of LeBron James agreeing to a 2-year, $85 million extension of his own. So the co-stars of the defending champs align for the next 3 seasons. Nick, final thoughts on the Lakers stars coming back?
So here's the thing. It seems anticlimactic that LeBron wasn't expected to sign an extension yesterday, but no one expected him to leave the Lakers anytime soon. And people didn't know when AD would sign his extension and for how long it would be. I had said he was either going to do the shortest possible or the longest possible, no in between. He ended up going longest possible, but nobody thought he was leaving. So it feels like, okay, this is about what we expected. But I think it's important to recognize it's only what we expected because of what they accomplished. It's only what we expected because in one of the most tumultuous, difficult, unprecedented years in NBA history, of all the teams in the league, this one, from start to stoppage to restart to finish, was the most consistent and seemingly had the best chemistry and was the most together. And that's a testament to Anthony Davis, who was in a winning situation for the first time in his career and not only rose to the occasion but thrived. And that man right there, LeBron James, who 15 months ago, Wilds, the narrative was Kawhi doesn't want to play with him. Paul George doesn't want to play with him. Who really wants to play with him? Is he that? Does he minimize his secondary stars? Is he going to LA for movies? Is the championship window closing? And now you've got a guy in Anthony Davis who has the ability to one day be the best player in the league, saying, I want to attach the rest of my 20s and into my early 30s to playing with you. And if the Lakers had gone the way, the Clippers did, and melted down in round 2 against Houston, are these extensions being signed? No, they're not. And so it feels like it was a definite, only because the Lakers did what they were not favored to do throughout the majority of the season, which is roll to the NBA championship, Wilds.
Yep. So here's a question for you, Nick. I'll throw it right back to you. When LeBron went to Miami, did the famous not 4, not 5, not 6, and it was like, kind of set himself up for disappointment. When he came to LA, when AD came to LA, I felt like the goal was one championship. Bring the championship back to LA. And they did it
Restore
right away.
the Lakers.
And it's the same thing. It's like when Kevin Garnett went to Boston, win one championship. That's what he got. Boom. Career was made. Now you're at another level. This success happened so early. The question for you is this.
They got to win another.
What would you consider a disappointment? What would you consider
if they don't win another
won
one?
Two a disappointment?
They got to win one.
You have to win another
one.
Yeah,
and Brandon, I'm curious where you're at on this. I think because they won in such overwhelming fashion, because they didn't have, they had a good free agency. LeBron is showing no signs of deterioration, and Anthony Davis was so good. I think if when LeBron retires, they haven't won another title, I think it will be considered a disappointment this tenure with the Lakers, Brandon.
Yeah, so where am I at with this? Last night was the news. LeBron James signed the extension, 2 years, $85 million. So that's what we were supposed to talk about this morning on our show. But I didn't think that was interesting news. We knew that. You talked about it, Nick. Everybody was talking about, well, LeBron James, the last chapter of his career, he's going to Los Angeles. His kids are going to be in high school. He wants to settle down. He loves the lifestyle out there. It's great for his family, the movies, the studios, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the first thing that came to my mind was, well, when is AD going to sign his contract? Like, you just won a championship with the greatest player of this era, can potentially go down as the greatest player ever. So what is the holdup here? And I'm glad that we're starting to hear more and the layers are being peeled back, because it gives insight to why it took so long. They share the same agent, and this kid was literally sitting back trying to figure out, what does the salary cap look like the next couple years so I can set up my career so this is not the last contract. So what does the contract after that and after that potentially look like? So I'm glad that they got it done. This is great for basketball. This is great for the Lakers. And this is also great for LeBron James. Why do I say that? Because now he has the player, the teammate that he can then pass the torch to in the next 2 to 3 years. LeBron James, it's all about chasing Jordan. It's all about getting 6. He is in perfect position to do that now, because there's only a few players in all of sports that can evolve and play differently. Some guys only can play their sport, their position one way. I think about in the NFL, Larry Fitzgerald going from the best wide receiver to now a really good tight end and still catching 70, 80 balls. Why? Because he's able to adapt, evolve. He has the mindset, he has the IQ. You have Charles Woodson, went from corner, all-pro corner. Then he went to safety, all-pro safety, played 15, 16 years. So LeBron is that. So I think this is perfect for him and the Lakers organization, because he can potentially win a couple more championships.
Well, and there's 30 teams in the NBA. This is great news for 2 of them. It's great news for the Lakers, obviously. It is also, in my opinion, great news for fans of the Milwaukee Bucks, because there was some speculation with the way Giannis speaks of LeBron up to and including a couple days ago calling him still the best player in the world, with the Lakers' potential financial flexibility after this season, with the fact that Giannis's brother is on the Lakers, that if Giannis didn't sign the Supermax and LeBron didn't sign an extension, AD just signed a 1+1, they both opt out. They both agree to take a little bit less, that the Lakers could then sign Giannis to the max contract and create the greatest 3-man, triumvirate in NBA history. The Lakers slammed the door shut to that even being a slight possibility. I think that is in part because they believe what I believe, which is what I've been hearing, which is that Giannis is going to, before that December 21st deadline, sign the Supermax with Milwaukee. And so Milwaukee Wilds kind of had an up and down offseason. Trade for Drew Holiday, think they have Bogdanovich. They don't have Bogdanovich. Giannis is still in Greece. He hadn't agreed to the deal. I think this is really good news for the Bucks. It's amazing news for the Lakers. And it's a big bummer for the rest of the Western Conference and the rest of the NBA.
Yeah, I never bought the Giannis to LA stuff at all. I never bought it at all. And you know what? Interestingly, when you hear Giannis talk about Kobe and how Kobe did it with one team, I actually think that ended up hurting the Lakers' chances. That Giannis said, you know what? I have a good enough team here. I want to build something. I think he's going to sign the Supermax. But I don't know what his time frame is. I still think he's there no matter how bad they botch the trade. But the sign and trade. Nick, if you keep on giving LeBron and AD championships, someone's not getting championships. That means your buddy Harden's not getting a championship. That means maybe Giannis doesn't get a championship. So I don't know who you think is the odd man out if you think the Lakers keep on collecting rings.
Well, we're not talking about for the next 15 years. We're talking about for the next 3 or 4 years, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and James Harden. And Kevin Durant's at the top of that list. Steph Curry's not on a contender this year. Harden's not on a contender this year. Kevin Durant supposedly is. But Kevin Durant, even pre-Achilles, was never as good as LeBron. And Kyrie Irving, on his best day, is not as good as Anthony Davis. So this duo being the better duo...
But together...
You're higher on
they can get it done.
You're higher on the Nets than I am. So listen, but to me, it's Durant, Steph, and Harden that are most negatively affected. Luka's got 15 years. Giannis has close to 15 years. Those guys will get their ring. It'll be their time eventually. But LeBron's not ready for it to be anybody else's time quite yet, Jenna.
All right. Anthony Davis, LeBron James, both signing contract extensions, both going to stay in L.A. for a while.